What's going on, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of the 715 Green and Gold Tailgate Podcast as part of the Man Cave Podcast, as brought to you by Hy-Vee in Eau Claire. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to both the Man Cave Podcast and the 715 Green and Gold Tailgate Podcast. All right, let's switch gears up a little bit with the NFL Combine coming at you this week. The Underwear Olympics, guys showing off their speed and their strength and how high they can jump, how far they can jump, cone drills, all that stuff. Maybe a little over-exaggeration, maybe a little overhyped. Whatever your feelings are like about the Combine, it's still a big time event for the NFL. It's still something I would like to actually go to in person and check out. Heard nothing but awesome stuff in Indy leading up to that. Like, the main thing is you hear these stories about like the front office peeps hanging out at restaurants and bars at night, and like just that'd be like the perfect networking opportunity. I'd still love to. That's one thing on my bucket list, is go to the Combine just for that. Not to watch guys work out, just to hang out with NFL peeps at all these different locales and such. But you know, the Combine, at least for me, is also when, okay, now we're really getting into, or starting to get into draft season. You know, 2 months from today is the first round. 2 months from today is the first round. It's coming up. So now it's starting to kick into gears. I know we've had mock drafts already out there. I haven't really paid a whole lot of attention. I've looked at it, but I don't take them, you know, fully. Give me till after free agency, those waves, because it could change needs and priorities for teams in a heartbeat. You know, like let's say, you know, I saw some mock drafts with Green Bay drafted it offensive tackle, or you know, if they sign a corner in free agency, maybe they're probably not going to draft a corner right away in the first round. That sort of stuff. So, but anyways, maybe you're not too familiar yet with a lot of the players in the draft process, or maybe some potential targets, specific player-wise for Green Bay. But there is something you could take away from the Combine and maybe try to get an idea of where the Packers are going to kind of focus, or what type of players they're going to kind of focus on. And if you follow a bunch of Packers stuff, if you follow some stuff on social media, you're going to see this a lot. RAS. What does that mean? The Relative Athletic Score. It was developed by Kent Lee Platt. It takes players' testing numbers, like also height, weight, 40-yard dash, etc., puts them on a 0 to 10 scale compared to other players at the same position. Obviously, 10 being the best, the highest. And all those numbers are combined for one final score. Okay, your RAS score. We've mentioned it a lot, you know, last few years and such. But this is something. This is the time to maybe this is where you get a gauge of where or who are some certain players that the Packers may be kind of targeting. And Green Bay is a team that really utilizes the RAS. Goody favors a lot of those athletes. Not all the time. As I'll give you some examples coming up here in a little bit. But this was a piece from Bill Huber for SI. And he notes, the Green Bay Packers might not use RAS, but General Manager Brian Gutekunst favors bigger, stronger, and faster more than most of his peers. That was evident after last year's draft, when they computed the cumulative RAS for every team in the NFL. The Packers ranked 7th. Quote, the Packers have been one of the highest RAS drafting teams for some time, so it was a bit surprising to see them only 7th in the NFL for their roster, Platt wrote. However, the averages are quite close, and the Packers have been doing this for a while, so it really makes sense that a few teams would jump them for their roster average because of teams retooling with a new GM or just other teams with an extreme focus on athleticism, as he noted, the Eagles as an example. So who are some of the players, specifically the first round, that Goody has targeted with high RAS scores? Remember, 10 is the max. Well, let's go through all the first round draft picks that Goody has had as general manager for the Pack. His first round pick, Jair, 9.53. Rashawn Gary, 9.95. Darnell Savage, 8.37. Jordan Love, 8.43. Eric Stokes, 9.37. Quay Walker, 9.65. Devontae, 9.59. Lucas Van Ness, 9.39. Jordan Morgan, 9.25. But, as Bill Hewer noted, he was actually graded 9.82 as a guard. So, gives you a little bit of example. We talk about those first-round picks. It seems like a lot that Goody has used those first-round picks on really talented, maybe some raw players, really athletic players. Maybe not quite ready to be full-on contributors. They kind of maybe bring them along a little bit there. The RAS fits that mindset, fits that mold. I mean, look at those guys. Like Rashad Gary had the highest one of those guys, right? 9.95. When he was drafted, he played like 30-40% of snaps because you had Za'Darius and Preston Smith via free agency. You had those guys molding Rashawn Gary. Devontae Wyatt, same thing. Quay Walker was thrown out there a little bit earlier. Lucas Van Ness, same thought process a little bit. Now, there are guys like Darnell Savage had the lowest, 8.37. He got knocked because of his height. That's where he got knocked, being undersized. So it fits that narrative of, first round picks where Goody kind of looks at guys like extremely athletic, potentially a higher ceiling than some of the other first round picks, but maybe not ready to contribute right away. And I thought it was an interesting note, too, by Bill here. He says, in the second round, only 2 players posted a RAS of less than 9.15. This was last year's draft. Jaden Reed, or last couple years' draft, in Goody's, I should say, in Goody's tenure, excuse me. Jaden Reed had a 6.74, and Javon Bullard had an 8.25. So I'm sure a lot of people are saying, well, the Jaden Reed one kind of worked out. And my guess is Jaden Reed, again, probably got dinged on size, on his height. 5'11". Not the biggest dude out there. That's probably where he got dinged up. Or his grade got dinged up a little bit. But ironically, when it gets to the third round, the 2 guys that were under that 9.15 were 2 busts for Goody. Jay Sternberger and Amari Rogers. So it's interesting, and I think that's something when you get for this combine and you start to see as these guys put their numbers out there, because this is how their RAS scores are going to come into focus, is through these combine drills. So we're going to start to see some of that come through. And that's where maybe we start to pay attention. Okay, so when these numbers come through, when these workouts come through, and these guys put together, their 40-yard dashes, and they're getting their measurements, and their quarterbacks are getting their hands measured, and all that stuff, it's going to combine into an RAS score. And then that's where we can kind of maybe look at, all right, these could be potential Packers targets. We know Goody likes big, fast, strong players, athletes, athleticism. And yes, it's not a full-on, foolproof system, Jaden Reed being the example of one. but it gives you a good idea. It gives you a glimpse of maybe the mindset of where this front office is going to be at or what they're thinking as we get closer to the draft. This is one of the steps. It's not the first step. I mean, their first step is those going to colleges and scouting trips during the college season and such. So they've already got some ideas. These testing numbers maybe solidify some of that stuff for these front offices. Maybe moves the needle one way or the other for them. But this is something, if you don't know a lot of these guys, if you don't know a lot of these players, you don't know a whole lot about them, start to pay attention to the RAS. You're going to hear that a little bit more in the coming days, coming weeks, coming months leading up to the draft. Especially when you get into mock drafts and more mock drafts. After the combine, you're going to have all these people throwing out mock drafts, versions, like 12 different versions and such, and you're going to probably hear RAS quite a bit and in almost every single mock draft. And if you want to get into the mock draft game and you're trying to figure out some Packer stuff, look at the RAS scores, the relative athletic scores. That's going to give you a good idea. Mixed in with Senior Bowl stuff, especially for later on draft picks. Who were guys that competed at the Senior Bowl? It's a pattern, okay? You know, Goody and those guys may downplay some of that. It's a pattern, though. Every general manager, every front office is going to have a pattern. Doesn't mean they're going to follow everything like that, but it's a good bet to look at, especially when you get maybe into late day 2s or early day 3s. All right, who are the guys that were at the Senior Bowl? Okay, what's their RAS score? But I think specifically the RAS score is going to factor into their first round pick. I think that's the big one. So if you're looking at maybe an edge rusher or maybe you're looking at a corner, look at those scores. When those combine numbers start to come through and you see those cumulative scores come through, look at those, okay? And be like, oh, okay, that's potentially a guy. You know, like if you got a corner that's coming in at 6 foot, 6'1", somewhere around there, and he's got an RAS score of a 9.6, well, that could be a potential Packers target. Or if you got an edge rusher that's like 6'5", RAS is like a 9.8, maybe a little bit raw, though. Oh, that just breathes a Packer player, right? So that's what you could pay attention to for this combine week. If you don't get into how fast a dude's running a 40 or how many reps he could do on the bench press, or you maybe just don't know a lot about these guys yet, after this is done, kind of look up those relative athletic scores, those RASs, because that could give you a little bit of a glimpse and maybe a peek behind the curtain of the guys that maybe Green Bay is going to be paying attention to the most.